All right, welcome to another episode of my podcast. Today we'll talk about another paper of mine. Um, a few minutes ago, I did some technical checkup. This is a new computer, and I hope it all works fine. It should. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Here we go. As usual, the papers I'm discuss here by myself. You can download them on my website. Here we go. We're gonna discuss my earliest papers, cognitive enhancement and the threat of inequality. You can also get it from the website of the journal here. Um, so, what is this paper about? We already had a session on a previous, much shorter version of this paper, in fact, that was previously published in Proceedings of the Spanish Philosophy of Science Association meeting. The bare bones of this argument was published. Here, it's a much longer version where I go in real depth in the arguments. And yeah, why don't we just start? Cognitive enhancement and the threat of inequality. Um, I think this was written while I was still an undergrad. There was a special issue in the Journal of Cognitive Enhancement. I had published an article on enhancement. I was very interested in the subject. It was a great opportunity to go in more depth into one type of enhancement technology that is cognitive enhancers, different from, say, trying to enhance your biology in different ways, say by enhancing, say, your strength, doping. You might consider that an enhancement technology. Here it's about cognitive enhancers, how to improve your cognition, your mood. So, the scientific progress approach is the point where significant human enhancements could become reality. Debates arise whether such technologies should be made available. This paper, let me just make the screen bigger. Perhaps it will be easier to read if you look at a video on YouTube and Spotify or the like. This paper evaluates the widespread concern that human enhancements will inevitably accentuate existing inequalities and analyzes whether prohibition is the optimal public policy to avoid this outcome. Beyond these empirical questions, this paper considers whether the inequality objection is a sound argument against the set of enhancements most threatening to equality, that is, cognitive enhancements. In doing so, I shall argue that cognitive enhancements can be embraced wholeheartedly for three separate reasons. However, though the inequality objection does not sufficiently support the conclusion that cognitive enhancements should be prohibited, it raises several concerns for optimal policy design that shall be addressed here. All right. So, introduction. Self-improvement has been of philosophical interest since the ancient Greek philosophers. New technologies, however, might fundamentally alter our understanding of what it means to improve. Furthermore, new ethical challenges present themselves that need to be answered. Eugenics has been the subject of diverse dystopian science fiction novels and movies, from Brave New World to Gattaca, and more recently, Star Trek. New technologies, of course, raised a lot of interest, how the future might look with them. So it's no surprise that they are featured in a lot of these novels. Now, they mostly depict a bleak future of humanity in which genetic determinism is taken to its extreme and technologies are seen very pessimistically. Nevertheless, genetic engineering is not the only way humans could enhance themselves or others in the future. Enhancements through chemical means, such as drugs, or technologies, such as computer chips in the brain, are also the subject of many futuristic fiction settings. However, these settings are not mere fictions and could be much sooner realized than anticipated. In the case of many drugs, such as modafinil or less obvious coffee, we are already faced with the question whether to enhance or not. Scientific progress has reached the point where serious engagement with the philosophical issues at stake has become unavoidable. In this paper, I critically examine the claim that human enhancement will inevitably accentuate existing inequality and analyze whether prohibition is the optimal public policy for this objection, as various sorts of egalitarians might therefore advise. Naturally, various small theories will evaluate this claim, which I shall call the inequality objection, differently. Yet for the purposes of the present paper, I shall consider the ethical concerns of the inequality objection, IO, in a way that is non-committal to any of the main moral theories, but may nevertheless be treated as relevant to policy evaluation. For instance, unequal access or an increase in criminal activity. An expanded abstract of an earlier version, as I mentioned, of this paper concerned more narrowly with utilitarianism and well-being, is forthcoming in the proceedings of the Congress of the Spanish Society for Logic, Methodology, and Philosophy of Science. Of course, very strong versions of egalitarianism may be immune to the criticisms, to the objections I present in this paper. However, such an immunity may then be considered as a liability to strong egalitarianism. Right. So, for instance, yes, we might think, well, strong egalitarianism might not advocate for this technology, but that seems to ask too much if it would say make everyone worse off. The question then becomes whether enhancement poses a threat to society. This threat is a deliberately vague notion, as this paper aims to explore a variety of concerns the inequality objection raises. However, in what follows, I argue that the IO abbreviated inequality objection has several problems. In light of these, I argue that cognitive enhancements can be embraced wholeheartedly for three separate reasons. First, there's no empirical evidence that cognitive enhancement will lead to more inequality. Rather, I argue that it has the potential to decrease it. Second, even if we accept that human enhancement will lead to inequality, it is not clear whether this will outweigh the potential benefits of human enhancement. Third, even if enhancement technologies do accentuate existing inequalities and have a negative impact on society, a strict egalitarian solution, for instance, outright prohibition of enhancement, may be worse than other kinds of policy responses. Therefore, the claim that human enhancement leads to inequality does not sufficiently support the conclusion that cognitive enhancements should be prohibited by policymakers. Nevertheless, the inequality objection raises several concerns for optimal policy design that shall be addressed in this paper. My criticism is structured as follows. In the What is at Stake section, I attempt to bring the inequality objection into formal argument structure and clarify terms that are unclear. In the Human Enhancement leads to inequality section, I attack the claim that cognitive enhancements lead to inequality. In the Inequality leads to negative social outcomes section, I analyze how inequalities in access to enhancements could negatively impact society and argue that such an impact is outweighed by the positive effects of enhancements. In the prohibition of human enhancement, the best solution, I argue that even if the inequality objection is right and a decrease in well-being is unavoidable, prohibition is unlikely to be the best possible policy response in order to maximize well-being. Lastly, in the conclusion, I summarize my criticism and conclude that the inequality objection does not sufficiently support the conclusion that human enhancement should be prohibited by policymakers. What is at stake? Though perhaps having raised the largest concerns in the public perception of human enhancement, the inequality objection is neither a very sophisticated argument nor a genuinely new one against the introduction of new technologies that could enhance humans beyond what might be considered normal. In the following, I'm going to show that the whole argument is just old wine in new bottles. Concerning inequality, Bostrom and Roach claim that one should hold prima facie justified worry could hold that people with, quote here, people with radically enhanced cognitive capacities might gain vast advantages in terms of income, strategic planning, and ability to influence others. In other words, an enhanced cognitive elite may gain socially significant amounts of power. Bostrom Roach, 2007, page 15. Interestingly, Bostrom and Roach restrict themselves to cognitive enhancements, suggesting that other enhancements might be less problematic or rather domain-specific, such as ethical discussions of doping in sports. Hence, I will restrict the following discussion to cognitive enhancements, which seems to me at least to be more problematic subset of enhancements providing a competitive advantage more severe than other sorts of enhancement. If cognitive enhancement are unproblematic, then by extension, human enhancement in general should not face much opposition. Of course, the idea of an enhanced elite accumulating a lot of power and creating a two-class society seems intuitive and rather unappealing. But whether this is even a plausible scenario is an open question. Rather than considering whether such extreme cases are likely, I focus instead on inequality in general. That is, evaluate the various scenarios in which increases in inequality can have a negative impact on society. From this broad perspective, the inequality objection can be formulated formally as follows. Premise 1, human enhancement accentuates existing inequalities. Premise 2, inequality has a negative impact on society. Premise 3, new technologies that have a negative impact on society should be prohibited by policymakers. And finally, conclusion, therefore, human enhancement should be prohibited by policymakers. So, as I shall show in my three-horned attack, this argument has major flaws. Though I am sure opponents of enhancements will find this restructuring of their worries exceedingly oversimplified, perhaps, this argument should enable both critics and proponents of enhancements to see where the substantial disagreement lies. Hence, in order to attack the inequality objection in a more precise and a clear manner, let me first clarify how I am going to use three crucial terms from the debate, that is human enhancement, inequality, and negative impact. First, I deviate from the orthodox definition of human enhancement provided by Bostrom and Roach, who defined human enhancement as interventions that, quote, aim to improve the state of an organism beyond its normal healthy state, 2007, page 1. This definition of enhancement faces several problems. What a normal healthy state is plagued philosophy of medicine since its very conception. In the following, I will use a definition of enhancement that avoids employing the concept of normality. This is in contrast to Lenin and Alhoff, who criticize a pro-enhancement stance on functional rather than human enhancements. In a previous article on genetic enhancement, I suggested that much disagreement between proponents and critics of human enhancement can be resolved by recognizing that most proponents of enhancement technologies, such as Savulescu et al. 2011, simply do not accept the orthodox view of what enhancements are. See also 2018, page 76. They draw an important distinction between, quote, functional enhancement, the enhancement of some capacity of power, e.g., vision, intelligence, health, and human enhancement, the enhancement of a human being's life. 2011, page 3. Human enhancement is then defined as any change in the biology or psychology of a person, quote, which increases the chances of leading a good life in a relevant set of circumstances. 2011, page 7. The latter is the definition relevant for the argument in this paper. That's what I'm interested in. So cognitive enhancements are most often associated with the increase of the cognitive capacity, irrespective of whether this increases the likelihood of leading a better life. That is not the form of cognitive enhancements I defend here. I argue that if a cognitive enhancement qualifies as a human enhancement, given the normative definition by Savulescu et al., that is, it improves the well-being of these people, then the inequality objection is insufficient to warrant prohibition. Why? Because the people are better off. So whether something qualifies as an enhancement is then the important issue at stake. However, in shifting our focus from functional to human enhancement, critics might respond that we have opened up ourselves to a much more severe criticism. Now, rather than dealing with the problem of defining normal functioning, they could insist that trying to give an account of a good life is a much bigger problem. I agree. Hence, I shall remain uncommitted to any particular view of the good life and employ Savulescu's strategy of defining all-purpose goods that would qualify as enhancements under all major accounts of the good life. Here, quote, I have not committed myself to any particular substantive conception of the good life. That is a complex question as old as philosophy itself. I believe that the best life is a life of objectively worthwhile activity that provides pleasure and is desired. 2007, page 286. So without committing myself to a particular view, I follow Julian Savulescu's suggestion of all-purpose means that would qualify under all major accounts of what makes a life go better. That is hedonism, preference satisfaction, and objective list theories. For those who don't know, hedonistic, it makes you happier, makes you better feel, it makes you feel better. Preference satisfaction, sort of you get what you want, and objective list theories is what people postulate are just objectively making your life better, even if it might not make you happier or it being what you want. Often mentioned education, which you might not have enjoyed when you went to school. So this enables us to avoid one of the oldest debates in philosophy and focus on the ethical implications of various cognitive enhancements. He suggests several cognitive enhancements that could satisfy his criteria, such as memory, self-discipline, impulse control, foresight, patience, sense of fairness, honesty. Quote end, 2007, page 284. Notably, some notion of general intelligence or computational power is missing here, and for good reason. The idea is that an improvement beyond a certain point, rather than going beyond what is considered normal, can have negative impacts on the well-being of the altered. Think of people who have no memory filter and remember any unnecessary detail of their lives and the high rates of depression among scholars. The research has not established sufficient links between higher intelligence and unhappiness. At least it's anecdotally reasonable that we should think or be wary of the fact that for increased abilities, there might be a trade-off of certain other capacities. Whatever goes beyond the point of making a human life expected to be better should simply not be considered as a human enhancement that is expected to improve a life. So, opponents might respond that a set of proponents of enhancements are trying to defend that is mostly future technologies would then just be empty given our insufficient knowledge in how they will affect the lives of agents. However, the welfarist definition of enhancement already covers almost all medical treatments as a subset of enhancements, as they are expected to improve the life of the recipients. In an earlier paper, I argue that according to the welfarist definition, a conception of normality, quote here, is not needed to define enhancement, as we do not define an enhancement as being better than normal, but simply being better, full stop, 2018, page 77. This also enables us to draw a useful distinction between interventions and enhancements, terms that are often used interchangeably, with enhancements being interventions expected to improve the life of the recipient. Right, so medical treatment then is just a subset of these treatments that we consider to get someone to perhaps a normal level again. But what matters here from a moral perspective, the reason we do it is that they improve the life of those who receive it, typically dramatically. Or at least we hope so. So, though the notion of normality has perhaps guided thinking in the biomedical sciences since the very beginning, the danger of such thinking becomes clear once it is recognized that it serves as the very basis of discrimination against minorities such as the LGBTQ community or the disabled. It's very important here. I think, or I've argued in many of my papers, that emphasizing normality is really the opposite of what we should do in thinking about what medical interventions we should pursue, because it can lead to really medieval ideas of considering the abnormal, deviating from perhaps the statistical average as, just something inherently bad. People should be condemned, and I think those are terrible notions. Even though a lot of philosophers try to bring these notions into our concept of health, I think that's a bad idea, but that's not a subject of this paper, really. So, deviation from what is considered normal should not be seen as a moral bias, but even those who oppose the discrimination of minorities use the very same moral concept to argue for a distinction between medical treatments and enhancements, right? So, they want to argue that discriminating minorities for being different is wrong, but then are against these types of improvements because they are beyond the statistical range, which in a way is a very similar problem. Why should this normality be of moral importance here? So, surely no one is taking the inequality objection seriously, would argue that we should prevent the development and use of new medical treatments just because that might lead to an increase in inequality, with only the richest being able to afford new treatments. New experimental treatments might be prohibitively expensive but become available to all with further medical advancements. However, by defining medical treatments as a subset of enhancements, the burden of proof is shifted to those who oppose enhancements. The proponent flat out denies a moral difference between treating someone and enhancing the life of someone. What the inequality objection illustrates, however, is that there might be better policies, reaping the benefits of enhancements while making them available or affordable for everyone. So let me postpone this issue to the prohibition of human enhancement, the best solutions, question mark section. The notion defended here then are human enhancements expected to improve the lives of those receiving them. However, the term cognitive enhancement is tightly tied to the conception of a functional enhancement, such as an increase of a particular cognitive capacity, for instance, memory and alertness. To ease avoidable disagreement within the debate, proponents of enhancements should clarify that they are specifically interested in cognitive enhancement that qualify as human enhancements, while opponents of such technologies might realize substantial agreement actually once this qualification is recognized. Nevertheless, when individuals enhance themselves or other individuals, there might be unforeseen negative consequences for the society. With this in mind, let me now turn to premise 1 and examine whether human enhancements lead actually to inequality. So, let me have a sip of water. Continue real quick. Human enhancement leads to inequality. Each of the following sections will be focused on one of the premises. Let me begin with the claim that human enhancement will increase inequality. This premise is empirical in nature and what as such requires supporting evidence. While it is unclear what evidence for the adequacy of this premise has been provided, there is at least some evidence that seems to speak against it. More specifically, there are reasons to believe that human enhancement will not affect inequality at all or even decrease it. As Bostrom and Roach, page 16, 2007, suggests by making people more equal, like it is the case with modafinil, Randall et al., 2005. Now, modafinil is a drug used to treat narcolepsy and disorders causing sleepiness. Modafinil helps people to stay awake and focused with a similar effect to that of caffeine. Just like coffee is used as a cognitive enhancer, people not suffering from any of the aforementioned disorders started using modafinil to reap similar benefits. The effects Bostrom and Roach, 2007, page 16, argue have a diminishing effect on those already possessing higher cognitive capacities. It can even lead to the opposite effect in those who already possess much higher intelligence than the average. If everyone had access to modafinil, it seems then likely that the result would be more rather than less inequality, as suggested by Bostrom and Roach. So, a substantial division between the unenhanced and enhanced seems then unlikely. Furthermore, Bostrom suggests that we know far more about genes responsible for inheritable diseases than genes responsible for talents, intelligence, and longevity. Hence, genetic enhancement might especially help the genetically worse off in a society. 2003, page 18. As I argued on previous publication, 2018, page 12, at least when it comes to genetic enhancements, we can expect them to get rid of a major source of inequality, that is the elimination of the natural lottery, which would then truly provide more equal opportunities. The inequality objection is then actually an objection against unequal access to these technologies due to existing inequity. Limited access or unavailability of such technologies for those who are already worse off may widen the gap between the rich and the poor even further. Many cognitive enhancements, however, in fact, the majority are freely available. Malinovsky and Shalamanova argue that research into meditation has shown that many cognitive capacities can be enhanced by meditation practices and even halt the effect of aging on the brain. These forms of cognitive enhancement seem to be entirely unproblematic. Critics of other forms of enhancement might want to defend a moral distinction between natural and artificial means. After all, they're not opposed to such forms of enhancements, nor following a healthy diet that increases cognitive capacities. Instead, they attempt to carve out a definition of enhancement excluding those we deem acceptable, making use of the enhancement concept solely for the purpose of drawing a limit to the aims of medicine. I do not think such a distinction can be provided for reasons going back as far as those provided by John Stuart Mill, who argued against the common idea to equate the good with the natural. After all, what is so natural about using a wheelchair or swallowing medicine against a headache? Right? These might be unnatural, but nevertheless great. However, there are other kinds of cognitive enhancements that might be prohibitively expensive. For instance, computer chips in human brains to increase cognitive capacities. Think of Elon Musk. or increase the release of dopamine and oxytocin. Um, with the years coming, time passing, all these speculative, perhaps technologies, enhancements are becoming more and more reality. So the same would hold for expensive drugs with similar effects. What we have to be concerned with is the plausibility of the inequality objection. Eric Perrins claims that, quote, those who already have economic resources will readily gain access to new technologies, and those new technologies will make them stronger competitors for more resources. 1998, page 8. If Perrins' claims is to hold, then an implicit premise needs to be true. That is, enhancements of, say, cognitive capacities must be good investments. Surely enhanced cognitive abilities could help you in the market. But that does not mean they are good investments. Owning the most recent sports car would certainly help you to transport pizza from place A to B faster, but that does not mean it would be a good investment for a pizza place that could hire a significant amount of additional workers instead. For this worry to hold, we need to consider cognitive enhancements that might enable agents to become more competitive. If there are investments worth making, it seems unlikely that people would not consider taking loans for self enhancements in order to increase the expected wage. Banks might even hand out loans for cognitive enhancements in a similar fashion to education loans. After all, if there is an expected monetary payoff, then a market will be created. However, one potential worry is that when everyone is forced to enhance in order to stay competitive, inequality in the society will increase while competitiveness remains the same. This precludes the possibility that a society where everyone is enhanced can have positive social outcomes such as higher wealth and productivity. Let me defer this discussion until inequality leads to a negative social outcomes question mark section, where I discuss positive and negative social outcomes. The enhancements equal out as everyone is enhanced. So instead of paying for advanced training, say, employers might even consider paying for cognitive enhancements for their employees. Just like many companies offer coffee for free for their employees, they might provide free access, say, to modafinil, a cognitive enhancer that is fairly cheap. Though I deem these markets to be problematic, after all, education loans are hardly uncontested, I argue that there is no substantial difference here between current policies against the accentuation of inequality in accepted cognitive enhancements and the future enhancement of future treatment of enhancement technologies. Here, they should be treated equally. After all, when one considers education a form of cognitive enhancement, similar concerns arise. Children from a better socioeconomic background do receive better education, benefits which can accrue over time. Affirmative action is widely accepted as an intervention to prevent these inequalities to become larger and larger. This gives us reason to believe that similar solutions are available in the case of enhancement technologies. Think of government loans for the education of those coming from poor socioeconomic backgrounds. So let me postpone again this discussion until a later section. A systematic review of Battle Day and Bram 2015 in healthy individuals suggests that attention, learning, and memory can be improved by taking modafinil without any negative effects, with long-term effects to be determined. Though, as of now, a couple of years after this paper was written, it still doesn't seem like there's long-term negative effects. Smart drugs such as modafinil are used among students, faculty, and people in the economy, especially highly competitive jobs such as trading. See Fronda et al. 2018. As many people believe the usage of smart drugs to provide an unfair advantage, perhaps even count as cheating, the number of actual users might be even higher than what surveys suggest, because people might be reluctant to admit it. So in fact, drinking good coffee over a whole day is hardly more expensive than taking a pill of modafinil. However, why then is drinking coffee morally unproblematic? Whether employers will provide their employees with cognitive enhancements such as modafinil is of course an open question, as the profitability and risks of most cognitive enhancements are currently unknown and still under research. However, once we reach the point to make confident statements on the expected life improving capacity of cognitive enhancements, all the alternative scenarios just suggested seem if not more, then at least as likely as the scenario of a divided society ruled by a cognitive enhanced elite. Even so, let us grant for the moment that above worries are all well motivated, and the poor will not be able to access cognitive enhancements themselves. In what follows, I consider premise 2 in the question whether inequality will really lead to negative social outcomes. So the section here is called Inequality Leads to Negative Social Outcomes? According to egalitarians, everyone should be equal. The conception of this equality might differ. For instance, economic equality, equality in well-being, and equality of opportunity, Arneson, 2013. Inequalities of all sorts have long been defended on the grounds that they improve the overall well-being or improve the lives of those who are worse off. What matters for enhancement advocates such as Sabolescu et al. 2011 is how different kinds of inequality have the potential to negatively impact society. Several reasons could come to mind: potential oppression, discrimination, unfairness, exploitation, envy, or simply a preference for equality. Melman and Botkin, 1998. Even if we grant that these are worrisome consequences of cognitive enhancements, we would still have to weigh the benefits against these costs. Proponents of prohibition, often referred to as bioconservatives, Bostrom and Roach 2007, seem to either ignore the benefits of human enhancement or implicitly think that they are far outweighed by the costs. To make their claim as strong as possible, I will give them the benefit of the doubt and tackle the latter. While we may grant that cognitive enhancement might decrease overall well-being by introducing inequality, there are other areas where human enhancement can potentially increase well-being enormously and outweigh losses through inequality. Even if only one cognitively enhanced scientist discovers a new cure to a disease, the effects on well-being would be substantial. Even minor increases in productivity, say 10%, in a workforce could have substantive positive effects in the long run. Since the Industrial Revolution, standard of living has improved to a level people could not have anticipated. This is largely due to the availability of new technologies for solving old problems ever more efficiently. Furthermore, I deem it unlikely that someone would be opposed to surgeons taking cognitive enhancers to increase their ability to concentrate during a complicated procedure, just because they would gain a competitive advantage over their peers. The value of saving lives here outweighs the negative effects of peer pressure to take enhancers. Competition drives innovation and technological progress, and the availability of cognitive enhancers will only accelerate this progress. However, these innovations may vastly improve the lives of others. After all, in most professions, competitiveness is not a mere zero-sum game. The worry of oppression and discrimination would require being able to determine who is enhanced and who is not, which is impossible with most cognitive enhancements. Unless you would have an enormous scar on your head, say, where a computer chip might have been implemented and people who do not have such scar are discriminated against, the worry rests on the discrimination of those who are less well off. When advantages in society are based on access to cognitive enhancements rather than claims such as effort and skill, the argument for redistribution seems to be strong, while an account of the third, for those, say, born rich enough to pay for enhancement, seems incredibly weak. In fact, the very presence of cognitive enhancers might actually lead to a society that, say, has more resource distribution, leading to a more egalitarian society. So, as argued in my previous paper, Procreative Beneficence and Genetic Enhancement, there could be potential solutions to keep the benefits of human enhancement while limiting the costs of inequality, most obviously state funding. Therefore, what I analyze next is the possible solution of prohibition and how it compares to other alternatives. So, even if we accept that human enhancement has the potential to increase inequality in a society, and the costs they put on society outweigh the potential benefits, let us grant all this here, the question arises whether a prohibition is actually the best policy to weigh these against each other. What we shall be concerned with here are the consequences of this prohibition. I argue that it is wrong to think that we have the choice between status quo and a world where human enhancement takes place. The mere availability of one additional option alone can change the whole situation here. In the economic domain, one can often observe seemingly irrational preferences. Suppose a customer looks at a menu of a restaurant and orders salmon rather than a steak. However, the waiter then suggests a burger with fries as an alternative that is not on the menu. The customer then replies, "No, thanks, but I'll take the steak now." That seems kind of irrational. Why do they suddenly change their preferences? This example seems irrational, but one explanation could be that a restaurant selling burgers has the high risk of selling low quality fish, hence revealing new information. It's a common example used in microeconomics starting courses or, say, decision theory. A well-done steak, on the other hand, might then seem like a safe bet. The availability of other options can drastically change the situation, even if a prohibition is in place. One only has to look at the prohibition of alcohol in the US. Even though a world without alcohol might be better, prohibition might lead to a much worse state of the world with high rates of illegal activity. Applied to human enhancement, it is easy to see that a world where it is illegal does not equal a world where this technology is not available. So, illegal provision of cognitive enhancers in a black market is just as possible as the provision of alcohol during the prohibition. The same applies to common debates in relation to doping, drug abuse, weapons, etc. The liberal argument against the prohibition of different sorts points out that even if a technology or practice is considered detrimental to the well-being of the population, the consequences of prohibition might be even worse. Not much of an argument is needed here to point out the failure of the war on drugs in the US. See Baum 1996. In fact, I have another paper on this with a lot of other bioethicists on why we should end the war on drugs. But that's going to be something for a future episode. So, in the following, I'm going to argue that the same applies to cognitive enhancements. Let us take a look at several problems suggested in literature which need to be considered. First, Bostrom and Roach highlight that a legal prohibition of a human enhancement requires distinguishing current practices of medicine from enhancements, which will create several problems, 2007. Page 1 to 3, but proponents of human enhancement as interventions that improve well-being do not have to deal with this arguably arbitrary distinction. This is not really a problem that has to be solved. When cognitive enhancements like medication and coffee are legal, but modafinil should be illegal, the distinction would have to be drawn. And that's something to do for those that want to have a different status for these different technologies. So, a distinction perhaps is unjustifiable, similar to the legal status of alcohol compared to, say, marijuana. Second, the prohibition would have to be globally enforced, otherwise one could still access these technologies at least somewhat legally. Helen Peterson, 2006. Permanent alterations to the human body are hardly detectable, nor is there any suggestion how perpetrators should be punished. Would they be forced to undergo brain surgery? What about genetically enhanced embryos that develop into highly intelligent children? Detection and punishment in all of these cases will lead to heated debates, even among those advocating a ban on such practices. Say, trying to give pills to these children that will reduce their intelligence. I don't know, giving them lead or something like that. That seems like a horrible practice. So it seems strange to think how the enforcement of such a ban on cognitive enhancement technologies would work in practice. Even if it might seem initially appealing, prohibition might be a really terrible policy. So third, Anders Sandberg and Nick Bostrom claim that a prohibition will be an incentive for the creation of black markets, which, as with drugs, may tend to make these technologies even more expensive, while legal enhancements would become less risky and less expensive as time goes on. 2009, page 333. Not only would a ban make cognitive enhancements more expensive, it could even lead to more inequality than a free market in cognitive enhancements. Fourth, Malman and Botkin, chapter 7 of their 1998 book, raised the question of how those breaking the law should be punished. For instance, will someone with genetic enhancements be forced to alter his DNA back to the point it was before or have to be sterilized? Will people who would have died without enhancements have to be sentenced to death by revoking the enhancements? These issues are not easily avoidable for legislators when effective prohibition is being implemented. So even if the claim is correct that human enhancement will lead to inequality, the proposed solution of prohibition seems to face severe problems that proponents of prohibition are invited to address. In short, there are several reasons speaking against prohibition and some that speak in favor of other solutions. Let me shortly expand on them. For instance, Nick Bostrom, 2003, page 17, proposes subsidies of free access for poor families. I agree with Lamont and Favor, 2014, section 6, that a middle ground between open market access and prohibition needs to be considered. As such, it seems that prohibition is not the best policy against the potential risks of inequality. Prohibition is likely to turn out to be worse than many other kinds of regulation that addresses at least some of the legitimate concerns the proponents of the inequality objection have brought forward. So to conclude this paper, conclusion, there seems to be at least three major problems with the inequality objection against cognitive enhancements. Firstly, there's no actual empirical evidence that availability of cognitive enhancements will lead to inequality. There are several reasons to suggest that cognitive enhancements might actually decrease inequality by leveling the playing field. Secondly, even if we accept that human enhancements will lead to some sort of inequality, it is not clear whether this will outweigh the potential benefits of cognitive enhancements. Even when one assumes a free market without subsidies for such technologies, employers and financial institutes should be happy to support workers in their quest to enhance themselves if it is in fact the case that this leads to gains in efficiency. Third, even if the effects of well-being in a society through inequality are substantial, prohibition is very unlikely to be the best policy for maximization of well-being. This is because it is, for instance, plausible to assume that given human enhancement is possible and distributed via black markets, there are several plausible ways in which this will affect overall well-being negatively. In light of these concerns, I conclude that even if human enhancement leads to inequality, this is not sufficient to conclude that human enhancement should be prohibited by policymakers. However, this is not to say that there might not be other arguments than an inequality objection that could warrant prohibition. So this was the article. What did you think? One of my earliest papers. Clearly, my English isn't as good as it is now. Copy editing a journal is also not the best and is getting routinely worse, unfortunately, due to the pressures to minimize costs. Otherwise, I like the paper. I think the argument is very solid, is really well structured. That is, even if those two previous arguments fail, inequality does become worse, well-being of people becomes worse because of cognitive enhancements. It doesn't seem that prohibition is then still the best solution. So you can really attack one argument from a bunch of different angles, and that's common in many areas of philosophy. And yeah, I haven't seen the argument refuted yet. Really, of course, we need something like an individual approach where different types of cognitive enhancements might be more perhaps to be seen critical than others. And I hope that I've moved the debate to some extent forward, that bioconservatives, critics of enhancements, can't just lump them all together and draw on some very basic distinction between normality and going beyond normality as something that can just tell us, oh, these are bad, these are good. That kind of argument I don't think works. We'll discuss one paper I've written with a couple of other bioethicists in the future, where I argue that we need a more individual approach, thinking about these different technologies more carefully, a more fine-grained approach. But yeah, otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think of this episode. As you hear on most YouTube channels, subscribe if you like this content. And otherwise, yeah, I hope you have a good week.